Hello and welcome to the Hookshot podcast on the Miracle Sports Network. I'm Andrew.
And I'm Nate. Today we are talking about our offseason preview for the Northwest Division teams.
Yes, so if you have been with us the past few weeks, we are keeping it exactly the same, where we will set a timer for 11 minutes on each team and discuss all of their potential offseason moves. So today we will be going from worst to best in this division. So we'll be starting with the Minnesota Timberwolves. And I will start the timer now. So the Timberwolves finished 19-45, which was 14th in the Western Conference, and they were the 24th ranked offensive team and 21st defensive team. And picks, they have the number one overall pick. They also have 17-33.
And under roster for next season, they have D'Angelo Russell, Josh Okogie, Jacob Evans, Jarrett Culver, Jake Layman, Omari Spellman, Jared Vanderbilt, Naz Reid, and Karl Anthony Towns.
Free agents for this team, the Timberwolves have a decent amount. The big one is Malik Beasley is restricted, and he has a qualifying offer of $3.9 million. He's definitely going to get more than that, in my opinion. So the Timberwolves will make that qualifying offer, but I think I really could see his contract going anywhere from like $12 to $20 million. Just kind of depending on how much teams like what they saw in his play with the Timberwolves. Being given good minutes and shooting over 40%, I believe, from three on pretty high temps, but just in a small sample size of games. Then there's Juan Hernan-Gomez, who is also restricted. His qualifying offer is $4.6 million. I could see him going for about $6 million. If the Timberwolves choose to match it at $6 million, I probably would. But if it goes a little higher than that, I might pass on that. And they have Jordan McLaughlin, who was kind of a surprise breakout, kind of backup point guard. He's pretty undersized, but his qualifying offer is $1.5 million, and obviously they should take that. But he could get a good amount more money, maybe like $4 million or something, 4 or 5, just based on his strong play and kind of ability to be that backup point guard. And then they also have Keelan Martin, who is also restricted with a qualifying offer of 1.5 million. And in my opinion, I think they should either take him for that or just let him walk. He didn't really like show anything, in my opinion, to like make me really strongly want him. But you want to keep a guy on your team for 1.5 million, you might as well. Any thoughts on those restricted free agents?
Yeah, I feel pretty similarly. I think clearly the big one is Malik Beasley.
Yeah.
With what he showed during his short time with the Timberwolves. I know he rejected a 3-year, $30 million deal from the Nuggets before he was traded. So I would think he would get more. And he definitely played like he deserves more. But once again, it's just that small sample size. And he also has that his old legal issue he's in right now. From what I see, it doesn't sound like it's really too big of a deal for him. It's more just kind of a wrong place, wrong time type of thing. So I don't know if that will affect it, but there's a chance that might. Juan Hernan-Gomez started every game he played for the Timberwolves. So he's at the very least he fits the system well that the Wolves are running, and they'll probably bring him back. Jordan McLaughlin, I would assume, would also be back. I don't know if he's going to get too much because he played like half a season. Because
Yeah,
he
it's hard to
spent a
say.
lot of time because he's on a two-way, so he spent a lot of time in the G League. But he played really well for the Timberwolves and started near the end. But they don't have any other point guards under roster backing up D'Angelo Russell, so I would think that they'd bring him back. And then Keelan Martin, I don't anticipate being back unless he comes back on another two-way, maybe, because I just don't think there's roster space when you
No.
factor in, especially when you factor in 3 draft picks coming back. And it's like it's already tough for roster space with how many guys they have just without free agents. If they sign anyone in free agency, that's another roster space taken. So mainly for that reason, I don't see Martin back.
Yeah, I would agree. Then they also have Evan Turner, who has never played a minute for them, and he said he will never play a minute for them. He's an unrestricted free agent, so he is obviously leaving and has a contract off the books. And then James Johnson has a player option of $16 million that he will definitely be picking up.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any offseason moves to target for this team?
I don't think the Timberwolves really do a whole lot this offseason. I think their big priority should clearly be the draft, especially with that number one pick. But really, they have 3 great picks in the draft. And there's once we see what these contracts and these RFAs are, they probably won't have a lot of money to really bring in free agency or free agents anyway. And with how many trades that they did in like during the trade deadline, where they basically dumped their entire team, I don't really see them making many trades either.
Yeah, I really see their only trade piece, maybe being James Johnson, just because that's a favorable contract of kind of a high dollar amount and only good for 1 year. But looking at like similar contracts, I really just couldn't see a trade being made. The only guy similar in money would be that I saw as like a maybe was DeAndre Jordan with Brooklyn. Um, which I think would help the Timberwolves kind of get like a good defensive post player, which I think they kind of desperately need. But I don't know why Brooklyn would do that trade because I've heard they really like DeAndre Jordan. And
Yeah.
I mean, unless they want to get rid of his contract, I don't see why else they would take on James Johnson.
I mean, I'm also fine with keeping James Johnson. I get it's a lot of money and he's not worth that money, but he really fits the Timberwolves system where with it, especially with his playmaking, I think his playmaking is extremely underrated and the Timberwolves current system revolves around a lot of open threes and cutting. So they really thrive on great playmakers to hit the cuts or the open threes, which is why their posts in James Johnson and Karl-Anthony Towns can really help that system because they're both very underrated playmakers. But I would only think he'd be in a trade at this point to match salary for maybe someone better.
Yeah, it's hard to say. I mean, there's rumors going around now of Timberwolves that maybe prefer to trade the first round pick for a win now guy, like the first overall pick, I mean. So I don't really know who that would be. I mean, Oladipo's name has been thrown around, so maybe
I
Johnson would
don't
leave
see
in
this
that
anyway.
trade.
They've already said that they're not going to trade the number one pick for Oladipo. They've been talking about trades with that, and it sounds like that might be centered more around the 17th pick. But they've already made it clear that they're not trading the number one pick for Oladipo.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see anyone trading someone better than Oladipo, honestly, for the number one pick. I mean, I
No,
think the Wolves are probably going to keep it. Who knows who they pick? The rumors are LaMelo. Uh, could also be just smoke trying to get more uh, trade value with the pick, as some teams really love LaMelo. Could be Anthony Davis. It's probably going to be one of those two guys. But yeah, I think I could easily see James Johnson staying on this team. There's also been talks of Jarrett Culver leaving, just how he had a disappointing rookie season, but he still was what do you go, number 6 overall last year, I
yeah,
think. So I mean, having a 6th overall pick still with how young he is still some value to some teams. And the Wolves kind of have a cluster of mediocre wing players, as I think Culver and Okogie are essentially the same person. But yeah, this team's probably not doing a lot. They don't have money to sign free agents. I think they like their guys they have in their core, and they want to just hope they develop into something good, which isn't necessarily a proven strategy for many teams, but who knows?
yeah. The thing I respect about the Timberwolves is it seems very clear that they have a plan and a system in place, and they're making sure they get the right guys to fit the system and plan. Which this whole team, like we basically haven't seen this team play at all. Really, there's like a little under 20 games they played after the trade deadline, which is when the whole team got reinvented. And D'Lo and Cat have only played one game together as the two centerpieces of this franchise.
Yeah, I mean, what was it? Probably at least half of their team was traded at the deadline, and probably more than half, honestly. And then after the deadline, that big win against the Clippers, and then Towns was hurt, and it was
Russell's
hard to
hurt a little
see.
bit.
Yeah, Russell was also hurt a little bit, so it's hard to see kind of what this whole team could do. But I think they're with this team expecting top 10, maybe even top 5 offense, which would be a big increase from 24th last year. And if the defense can stay kind of slightly below average, I think they would count that as a plus. And those numbers would be, you would think, hopefully competing for a playoff spot. But honestly, in the West, I don't see the Timberwolves competing at all next year.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think a lot of how they do next year depends on what they get in the draft. I pretty much fully expect them to pick the number 1 pick at this point,
I think so too.
but you never know. And I'm hoping they take a nice role player with 17 and maybe something with 33 they can get.
Yeah. All right. That's the timer. So we will move on to the next team. And we have the Portland Trailblazers here. They finished 35 and 39, which was good for 8th in the conference. Kind of moved up at the end to get in that playoff series, which they won, but then they lost to the Lakers in the first round. And Portland was ranked 3rd offensively last year and 28th defensively, and they also carry picks 16 and 46 in the draft.
So under contract for next year, they have Damian Lillard, CJ McCollum, Anthony Simons, Gary Trent Jr., Trevor Ariza, Nasir Little, Yusuf Nurkic, Zach Collins, and Moses Brown.
Yeah, they also have quite a few free agents. Starting off with the restricted guys, they have Wenyen Gabriel and Jalen Horde, both with qualifying offers of about 1.7 million. Wenyen Gabriel, I say they should pick up, and I think he's pretty good. He could maybe go for a little bit more money. So maybe match to just like a certain extent with him. And then Jalen Horde is only 21. He hasn't shown like a lot of signs of succeeding, but for a 21-year-old, I'd take him for 1.7 million. And
Yeah, I would.
then, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I'd expect them back. Just they're both young, and the only reason I wouldn't think they'd be back is in case of they like if they need the roster spot for someone else.
Yeah. And then player options, we have Rodney Hood with $6 million. I think he will take that. And then Mario Hezonja has a 1.9 million player option. And I could maybe see him taking it. That one I was a little unsure of whether he would or not. He could maybe get a little bit more money, but probably not a whole lot more. And then they have a few unrestricted free agents. Hassan Whiteside, I thought he played really well. Some people kind of hate on Whiteside, but I thought he played pretty strongly on this team. But he's just going to cost too much money with the contracts they have. And then Caleb Swanigan is unrestricted. He doesn't do much for this team. I think they're just going to let him go. And then you have Carmelo, who I think on the eye test played really well, but kind of looking at more of some of his advanced stats, and everything. He was pretty poor, especially on the defensive end, and didn't really offer a ton offensively. But I think he hit some big shots, kind of gave him a boost as a team. So I think they'll bring him back, and that's kind of part of the reason why Whiteside's not going to come back. Um, they also have an option of they could cut Trevor Ariza and gain $11 million because his contract is not guaranteed fully. So if they want to slide in, maybe Gary Trent, I guess, could do that, or Carmelo could move to small forward and Zach Collins starts. Something along those lines, they have that flexibility.
Yeah, I pretty much agree with most of that there. I I believe they'll bring back Carmelo. He said he
Yeah.
wants to come back. I feel like they'd probably want him back. I think he might play small forward. He slimmed down and looked really great, like physically in the bubble. So he might be able to play small forward going forward. I
Yeah, I
think
think
Rodney Hood could as
they
well,
could.
coming back from injury. I don't think he accepts the player option, and I feel like maybe talent wise, Rodney Hood could get more than 6 million, like much more. But you just never know with like people coming back from injuries, especially in this COVID time. But
Yeah, I think he'll pick it up.
I would assume I'd personally think he'd opt out and probably get more on the open market.
I don't know. It's also tough with just no one really knows what the salary cap's going to be. I think
Hmm.
some players maybe take the safe option this season, but it's hard to know exactly what. But I mean, he could easily be a mid-level exception guy, and I guess that's kind of about where the mid-level exception is, around that, between $5 and $6 million. So he could get more, but maybe he opts out and resigns with Portland too. That's also an option. So do you have any off-season targets for this team?
My biggest offseason target for them is a power forward, just as a position. I'm a big fan of Zach Collins and
Yeah,
Yusuf
I like him.
Nurkic, but I if you paid attention during all these podcasts, I'm a big fan of more the small ball future NBA that's going to, and I'm not a big fan of starting Collins and Nurkic together. And if it comes down to picking them, I definitely take Nurkic. So, I mean, they don't necessarily have to trade Collins, but I would especially be looking for stretch, probably also stretch for a guy who can shoot and play really good defense to come in and help the team. One of my favorite guys that I think could pretty much just fit on any team is Jeremy Grant, where if they cut Trevor Ariza, they could have the money to sign Grant, and I really don't know how much he's going to go for. I think his stock has really increased in the playoffs, but he's a UFA. They can maybe even work out a sign and trade with Denver. Maybe they could offer up that 16th pick. Otherwise, they could maybe draft someone. I don't know if anyone they draft would start, but Patrick Williams might be there. He's a little more raw, but he's a really good defensive player and he can shoot. Otherwise, maybe not quite the shooting part, but Precious Achua can really help on the defensive end, and he's very versatile, which I think is a lot of what Zach Collins offers. But I don't know. Achua might be a little better fit, I think. Just more for the modern NBA at the four position.
Yeah, if they move Precious, I could see him, uh, maybe not right away in the beginning of the season, but later on potentially starting for this
Hmm.
team.
I could see him just
But
at the very least being a really solid role player right out the gate for them.
yeah, my big thing I looked at for them was they were 28th defensively, and I think they just need to bring in some defensive players. I mean, Whiteside's really strong defensively, but he's gone. Lillard and McCollum aren't anything super special. Carmelo is really bad defensively. So just looking at free agents, I saw Josh Jackson. He really doesn't do anything offensively, essentially, but he's pretty long and is very strong defensively. and is a well above average defensive player in this league. So I think they could sign him for the mid-level exception probably, and get him on this team, which hopefully bumps him up a little bit. Maybe they can bring him in key spots, coming off the bench and kind of guarding some of the better players that they're going against. Do you have any
Yeah,
trades?
I think a lot of the trades depends on what they're willing to trade and who's out there. I don't I feel like it's a tough spot where I don't really know if I can see trades. I mean, I mentioned the Jeremy Grant, maybe it could be a sign and trade for like the 16th pick, which I think Denver would clearly do because otherwise Jeremy Grant could just walk.
Right.
And then Portland can get a guy who can shoot the three really well and a terrific defensive player in Jeremy Grant at a position of need that they need depth at. And otherwise, I don't really see them making a move unless they decide they want to trade like CJ McCollum or something, which I don't think it's at that point. So I just don't think there's a lot out there for them to trade.
Personally, I think they should move on from CJ McCollum. I I don't think he can be your second best player and be a really good team. I mean, Damian Lillard is, as he showed in the bubble, one of the best point guards in the league easily. And I think just the value for CJ isn't quite there. So I don't think they likely move on from him. But personally, I think it's been time. Lillard and CJ have been paired up for a long time together, and they went to the one Western Conference Finals, but lost. But ever since then, they've kind of just been like a borderline lower bubble team, um, and just kind of struggled to stay healthy overall. So one idea I had was trade CJ McCollum and probably that pick 16 for Oladipo and just a contract to match. I think Oladipo's an upgrade from CJ, at least a little better defensively, maybe similar offensively, maybe slightly lower. Or Portland could go for the big home run, uh, trade CJ McCollum and also Gary Trent, who I think people see as a pretty positive piece now, as he kind of played a role in this team later in the season, and a first rounder, and maybe next year's first, and try to lure Bradley Beal from the Wizards and just kind of get an absolute elite offensive team. You have an opinion on either one of those trades?
I don't think the Oladipo trade makes sense. He's got 1 year on his contract and he's going to be a UFA. I think he's a pretty big step back on offense. He's definitely better defensively, but especially to throw in the pick there, I just don't think it makes sense. With Bradley Beal, I mean, I don't know why the Warriors would or the Wizards would do that because I feel like if they're going to trade Bradley Beal, it's probably because they're committing to a rebuild
Yeah,
and taking on CJ McCollum, who's in his late 20s with like 4 years left on his deal. I don't think is doing that.
I don't know. I don't
Whereas I
likely
think
see it happening, but
no.
it was just some potential ideas I had. Right. So moving on to the next team, we have the Utah Jazz, who were 44 and 28 last year, which was sixth in the conference. They were 10th offensively, 13th defensively, but then they lost in the first round to Denver, barely in a game seven, and they only have one pick this year, which is 23.
Under contract for next year, they have Nigel Williams-Goss, Donovan Mitchell, Mie Oni, Bojan Bogdanovic, Joe Ingles, Royce O'Neal, Georges Niang, Ed Davis, Rudy Gobert, and Tony Bradley.
This team has 3 restricted free agents, Juwan Morgan, Rajon Tucker, and Jarrell Brantley. Juwan Morgan and Rajon Tucker both have qualifying offers of 1.75 million, which I don't really feel strongly towards either one of them if they let them go or keep them. And then Jarrell Brantley has a qualifying offer of 1.5 million, and I think they should just move on from him personally. Thoughts on any of those?
I'm pretty indifferent on any of them.
Yeah,
If I'd
they're
have to bring any back, I'd probably take Rajon Tucker just because wing depth is always good, and I think he can be a nice deep bench piece for cheap.
yeah, none of those guys really contribute a whole lot. And then they have Mike Conley with a player option of 34.5 million, which he is 100% certainly going to pick up. And unrestricted free agents of Jordan Clarkson and Emmanuel Mudiay. Clarkson, I think, is going to walk uh, just because of the money involved, probably. And I don't think the Utah feels they need to keep him with some of the depth they have. And then Emmanuel Mudiay, I think if you could sign him for the minimum and have him be kind of maybe your third point guard option, I kind of like that move.
Yeah, I don't see them bringing both of them back. I think they want to, but money will just become an issue,
Yeah.
especially with Royce O'Neal's contract kicking in as well, which isn't too large, but it's a big jump up in price for him. And they don't really have any great point guard depth behind Mike Conley, who didn't even start for them at points because he was struggling. And Emmanuel Mudiay was a really good bench piece for them. But Jordan Clarkson they acquired at the deadline, and I would argue he's probably their most impactful player off the bench when they traded for him. Just being that sixth man coming in and scoring. Where I think they'd love to get both back, but I don't know. If you can make it work, I'd definitely bring them both back though.
Yeah, I don't know if it's gonna happen. Mike Conley's obviously the really big one there. He is making 34 million, which is one of the highest paid people in the league for a guy who struggles to start for your team. Is obviously a pretty big downfall. He really took a step back last season, but I think they're kind of stuck with him for a year.
Yeah. And
Obviously, or go ahead.
if I'm the Jazz, I'm also definitely willing to give him another shot. I I think he could have a rebound year and be much better. And you just have 1 year left. If it really doesn't work out, you can just let him walk.
Yeah, I've been big on Mike Conley throughout his career. I think he's been kind of a little bit of an underappreciated point guard.
Yeah.
Not really. I don't think has he ever been an all-star? Maybe
No,
once? No.
don't believe so.
Um, yeah, I don't think so either. Um, I think he definitely has been all-star quality in his career at times. But he's getting a little older, so maybe he turns it around again. Sometimes players tend to do that, but yeah, it's unfortunate. I mean, if they could get that contract out, they could sign a really key guy, and I think Utah would be one of the bigger threats in the Western Conference with the play of Donovan Mitchell and him kind of becoming a superstar in the bubble, I think. Do you have any free agents this team could possibly sign?
Not really. They're I think that they just try to bring back those two guards, Moody and Clarkson, and they don't have any money to bring anyone back. I mean, I'd expect them to pick up some undrafted guys maybe under two-way, but I just don't really think they're in a position unless they really blow up the roster at some of these positions to really get Cap to sign anyone.
Yeah, the only thing I could see maybe is they bring some sort of power forward in, like a stretch four. As Rudy Gobert uh, obviously doesn't shoot any threes. He's And Royce O'Neal isn't the best shooter either, I don't believe.
I mean, Royce O'Neal's also 6'4".
Yeah. Um,
I
I
mean,
mean,
they
he
did
shoots he
start.
shoots the three a little bit, but
Yeah, but they did start Bogdanovich at the 4 a lot last season.
yeah, they also have that.
But they could
Now that he's
they
gonna be
could also get a
healthy.
4. They could get a 4 and start him at the 3.
Yeah, I don't. Maybe I mean I don't really know. Looking at free agents, who's really there? I mean, Dario Saric is a bit of a stretch for. Uh, Hernan Gomez, but I mean, if they offer mid-level exception to Hernan Gomez, I think the Wolves are going to match. Saric, I don't really know exactly what he's going to go for money-wise, but I don't know. I just think they should maybe get a power forward, someone maybe a little bit bigger who can space the floor a little bit, and hope Rudy Gobert holds his own in the post, which he usually does, but maybe a little less so in the past year or so.
Yeah, I think this team is like a lot of teams, just kind of in a tough position where I don't really see how they can get a whole lot better under their current team. I think a lot of their success next season will come in whether or not Mike Conley can rebound. And if also Joe Ingles had a bit of a down year, if he can rebound a bit too to contribute as a nice 3-and-D guy. Like I could see this being a top team in the West or a team that's fringe playoff, depending on how their players perform.
Yeah, they're definitely not gonna get better by signing players, and I guess you just hope that some of the older guys on the team don't digress with their age and can kind of reinvent themselves and ride the back of Donovan Mitchell, hopefully.
Yeah, I mean, if I were the Jazz in this situation, maybe this year's not the year to do it, but maybe it's next year. I would consider to start blowing up the team. Like keep Donovan Mitchell, but no one else is safe. And like even if they wanted to do it this year, like maybe they could be able to trade up. I mean, I don't know if like a guy like Bogdanovich would do it. If they really want to get crazy, maybe they could trade like Gobert up and get the number 2 pick to get another big piece. But I don't think that's going to happen this year. But it's something I would personally at least consider if I was the Jazz.
I mean, they also, with Mike Conley's contract coming off next year, go out and get one of those
Yeah.
uh, big max guys. And I mean, Gobert's contract's also up after next season. Both those guys are unrestricted, so they'll have money in 2 years, which you pair Donovan Mitchell with another max guy and another strong third option potentially. I mean, the Lakers just showed that they kind of just need you can ride with two superstars and hope some role players fill in alongside you. So
Yeah, but Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert are nowhere near the level of Davis and LeBron,
no, but
where they're not going to carry the team to a championship whatsoever. I mean, then Rudy Gobert's contract is also open, so
yeah,
but Donovan
yeah,
Mitchell will
he's
also
up
be
after 1 year.
resigned. So
That is true.
if they bring back Gobert and Mitchell, that's going to just eat most of that cap that they'd get anyway. Not saying
Yeah.
they can create more. Like they can always trade Ingles, Bogdanovich, and always get more. But especially with just Mitchell need to be resigned, I wonder. I mean, we'll see how big that is. I'd assume it's probably about a max.
All right. So moving on to the fourth team we will talk about today is the Oklahoma City Thunder. And the Thunder finished 44-28 last season, which is good for fifth in the conference. But they lost in the first round to Houston in the playoffs. And Oklahoma City was the 16th ranked offense and the 7th ranked defense. And they have picks 25 and 53 in the draft.
Under contract for next year, they have Chris Paul, Dennis Schroeder, Shea Gilgeous-Alexander, Terrence Ferguson, Lou Dort, Darius Baisley, Isaiah Roby, and Steven Adams.
So this team has 3 team options to look at, which is Abdel Nader for 1.75 million, Deontay Burton for 1.6 million, and Hamidou Diallo for also 1.6 million. I think they should pick up Abdel Nader and Diallo, and then I wasn't really strong towards Deontay Burton, and they could easily just let him go, in my opinion. And then Mike Muscala has a player option of 2.2 million, which might pick up. I don't know, 2.2 isn't that much. He could maybe get a little more, but hard to say. Do you agree or disagree on any of those?
Yeah, I think Nader is proved to be a solid bench piece for them. And I don't know how many minutes Diallo would get because I feel like Ferguson would get more, and the emergence of Lou Dort in the bubble, I think he'd get more minutes. But for as cheap as that is, at like 1.6 million, I would definitely pick Diallo up. Burton, similarly, I mean, if they need him, if they need to fill the roster spot, sure. Muscala, I thought, had some nice play for them at the end of the actual season before the bubble, especially when Steven Adams got hurt. He played some decent minutes for them, and even if he doesn't pick up the player option, I wouldn't be surprised if they try to work out a deal to bring him back just as a bench piece.
Yeah, I think Diallo would get a few more minutes next season, with Andre Roberson being a free agent and probably not coming back.
But
But
Andre Roberson didn't play last season at all either.
a
So
little bit, but
he
yeah,
played in the
that is
bubble.
true.
He came back.
Yeah,
There's no you're not getting any minutes there. But I'm saying the minutes that he did have, I feel like would be taken more by Lou Dort and his coming out in the bubble.
yeah, that's true. Moving on to unrestricted free agents, there is Danilo Gallinari and Andre Roberson, and I think both are going to leave. Gallinari is just going to be a lot of money. I think he will still bring probably over $20 million potentially. And Roberson, I think they're just going to move on from him after a pretty long stretch with this team, uh, and just let him go somewhere else, maybe.
Yeah, I think whether or not they bring back, especially a guy like Gallinari, depends on what they intend to do next season. They could easily just bring him back and try to make another shot at it, but I think they're probably going to just dismantle the team and embrace the rebuild that they have with all those picks they got from Westbrook and Paul George trades.
Yeah, I think so too. Um, any offseason moves? I mean, there's obviously the big target of Chris Paul is probably going to be moved this offseason, but anything else?
Uh, I mean, yeah, I think Chris Paul is the big one there. I could see a Danilo Gallinari sign and trade. It's hard to predict like where that would go because I feel like that would just kind of happen once he decides on a team, maybe.
Yeah, signing trades are
And
tough.
Steven Adams, I don't think they'd trade. If they trade him, I'd maybe think maybe it's more like a deadline thing. But I don't know who's going to trade for him. I mean, he's 1 year left, but at the 27 million, he's a great player. But I feel like teams that would probably want to trade for him are probably more contending teams that probably don't have that cap space to take that on. And otherwise, he's not like that old, unlike like a Chris Paul or Danilo Gallinari, where he's only 27, I believe. So you could just keep him still for a little longer, re-sign him after next year, and he can be a part of your rebuild.
Yeah, I probably don't see Adams getting moved necessarily,
You know,
but I do have a few Chris Paul trade ideas. So one would be, so this is fully embracing the rebuild. One is to Utah, who we just talked about, for Mike Conley and Ed Davis or a similar contract to match. And then probably their first round pick and maybe another pick after that. That would kind of give Utah that second star and just give Oklahoma City some more picks to build with, and then also the opening up of Mike Conley's contract after next season. And then my other one was to Milwaukee, which is kind of a tough trade just with how their contracts are. If they choose to give up Middleton, I don't think they will,
No.
but it's CP3 to Milwaukee for Bledsoe, George Hill, and Brook Lopez, which are kind of just the three contracts that it takes to match Chris Paul's. And then I think it would maybe take 2 or 3 first round picks. Just assuming Milwaukee's gonna be good. Those picks are not gonna be very good, so I think Oklahoma City is gonna ask for a lot there.
Yeah, I also had a Milwaukee trade that was slightly different. I had a few different players to make the contracts work because I don't think that they would trade Brook Lopez, and I don't think it would make sense for Oklahoma City to want him back. But
Yeah, I was stuck on the Brook Lopez, but his contract was just kind of the right dollar amount.
yeah, but I had George Hill, Eric Bledsoe, DJ Wilson, and Dante DiVincenzo, where uh, the DiVincenzo and Wilson contracts kind of balance out where you're getting the Brook Lopez from. But DiVincenzo is like the one really promising young player on their team, which he's a big asset coming back in this trade that the Thunder would be looking at. And for sure, probably at least like the 24th pick in the draft this year.
Yeah.
Um, maybe you could just throw in like some seconds, maybe another first, a future first. But I could see the Bucks doing that because I think they need to go all in this year, which could potentially be the last year with Giannis.
Yeah, I like that trade idea better than mine. I think
Yeah.
giving Oklahoma City DiVincenzo, who has shown a decent positive value and probably a first round pick or so would be beneficial to this team, but I mean they'd probably be committing to a rebuild then for a few years with
Yeah.
whoever they have. But
My only
there's some
concern with
promise.
it is DiVincenzo and Shea are both kind of combo guards. I mean, Shea did play point guard his rookie year with the Clippers, and DiVincenzo played some point guard in college, and it could work, but that's just maybe a little possibly not ideal. But I would still just take the talent there because Chris Paul is not in the future plans of this team, so I would just trade him this offseason, get the best thing I can get. Otherwise, another trade I had looked at, which I don't understand why, but it's the Knicks. I just don't see why the Knicks would go all in for Chris Paul because he's old and their team is really bad. Easily one of the worst rosters in the league. And they don't have the pieces around Chris Paul to like they just don't have the pieces to really contend whatsoever with him. But a trade idea would be a guy like probably Bobby Portis or Taj Gibson, just maybe for a little salary match. The Knicks have a lot of cap space though, so they don't really need a match. Maybe they throw in a guy like Alfred Payton, who could play some point guard. And then I would think the two young guys I'd really be looking at would be Kevin Knox and Frank Ntilikina, as Kevin Knox has been disappointing, but I still think he's a pretty solid prospect to just for them to take back when they're getting multiple assets back for Paul in this trade to see if they can get anything out of him and maybe change of scenery works for him. And Frank Ntilikina, I mean, I'm a big fan of Frank, but I don't think it sounds like he's the Knicks point guard of the future. And especially if they're getting Chris Paul, he's taking that starting point guard spot that Frank hasn't even really necessarily taken. He's still young, and there's a lot of potential in him. And then I would think there's probably at least be like a future first in there somewhere as well.
Yeah, that is also another option. Should we move on to Denver then?
Yep.
Okay, so the last team we were talking about today is the Denver Nuggets, who were 46-27 last year, which was third in the conference. They were ranked fifth offensively and 16th defensively. And after making a several comeback series run in the playoffs, they lost in the Western Conference Finals to the Lakers. And then they have pick 22 in this draft.
So under contract for next year, they have Jamal Murray, PJ Dozier, Ante Morris, Gary Harris, Will Barton, Keita Bates-Diop, Vlatko Kankar, Michael Porter Jr., and Nikola Jokic.
Oh, they have one restricted free agent in Torrey Craig, who has a $3.8 million qualifying offer, which I think if you can sign him for that, that's positive. But he could maybe go for a little bit more, and I think that's fine matching that. And then they have Mason Plumlee as an unrestricted free agent, and Paul Millsap also as an unrestricted free agent. I think you could maybe do a sign and trade potentially with Millsap, or probably just let him walk, especially with the emergence of Michael Porter Jr., I think. And then Mason Plumlee, I think if you could bring him back for about 5 or 6 million, in my opinion, I'd bring him back, kind of just to come off the bench behind Jokic, and not lose too much post presence there with Millsap and Plumlee leaving. And then Jeremy Grant has a player option of 9.3 million, which he could probably get a little bit more, so he could not accept that unless he really wants to stay with Denver. And with how close they got to the finals last year, try to keep that going.
Yeah, I'd be pretty shocked if Grant accepts that player option. That could also just be because I'm biased because I really like Grant. But I think really still with what he showed, he'd probably get more. And there's a lot of teams that'd be interested in him. I have no idea how much money Mason Plumlee will get. I'd agree if he'd come
Yeah,
back for that price, I'd bring him back. Otherwise, I don't know. I also have no idea how much money Paul Millsap would get just because he's in his mid 30s now. He's taken
I
a
really have
step
no
backwards,
idea.
but he's still very effective. And it would be a big blow for them to lose both Millsap and Grant. I think they could survive without him, but it would definitely be a big blow. And Torrey Craig is a guy I would definitely bring back for that price, maybe a little more, as you said. I
Mhm.
think he's a really solid contributor off their bench, a solid 3-and-D player.
Yeah, I just don't know if they have the money to bring Millsap back. I mean, I guess if Jeremy Grant doesn't resign, that opens up another 9 million, but I think Paul Millsap could probably get more than $9 million. Hard to
Yeah.
say.
And Jamal Murray's contract kicking in now, which takes the money.
Yeah, I think that is taking that into account. They're kind of like right at the salary cap right now. So I don't know, it's kind of tricky for this team to do a lot, but obviously I think they believe they can be one of the best teams next year and take another big leap again as they've kind of done the past couple of years with some of the pieces they have. Maybe they feel comfortable with Mason Plumlee leaving. If they feel really good about Bol, some people are really high on him. Hard to know if he's actually good, but
I don't see him being a top contributor next year.
I don't either.
He,
But
I mean, he was playing down in the G League with Windy City, and he wasn't lighting up the G League at all. He's kind of struggling at times, and he showed some great flashes in the bubble, but still, like, it's not like he was a really, really impactful contributor in the bubble for them.
Yeah,
I
I would
could see,
agree.
I could see him getting some NBA time next year, but I still think he's a ways out from being a big contributor for them.
Yeah, I think the Nuggets probably feel that way. There's just kind of a lot of hype of him coming back. He played really well in like a scrimmage or something, and some people kind of went crazy about his hype. And he showed some flashes in the bubble, but the bubble is the bubble and isn't necessarily the most translatable to a normal NBA court, uh, especially when you're on the road. Have any offseason moves to this team?
Yeah, I have one big idea I like, which is trading for Drew Holiday, which has been talked about with the Nuggets for a while. I could see the Pelicans being willing because Holiday's entering his last year and they're looking to go younger. And looking at the shooting guards on this team, pretty much have Gary Harris and Will Barton, which you could use those guys to match the contract. Gary Harris has been pretty disappointing this last year and not really living up to that money. Either way, just train either of those players to free up money. Could also be an idea to re-sign some guys. But a few potential ideas for Drew Holiday would, I mean, you could always trade Michael Porter Jr., but I don't think that's going to happen.
No.
Otherwise, maybe you could use one of your power forwards as a sign and trade, which I don't know why the Pelicans would necessarily do that. I'm just thinking like assets they have. And otherwise, I would think it'd probably be centered around Gary Harris. Like I could see Gary Harris, probably the 22nd pick they have. Maybe other picks. He only has 1 year left on his contract. Monte Morris, maybe, if they'd want to move on from him, could be appealing as a backup point guard for the Pelicans. And then from the Pelicans standpoint, Gary Harris can come back. You can see if he can bounce back from just a little bit of an off year because he's still not that old. He's like probably about 27, maybe 26, 27, I think. And the other pick, I think the 22nd pick is a very valuable pick in this draft, where the Pelicans compare that up with pick 13. Maybe some future picks. If they could get Monte Morris in there too, that could be a really good young point guard for them. That would be just an upgrade over a guy like Frank Jackson, who they might not bring back either. And I'd really love to see the Nuggets do this because I think a backcourt of Jamal Murray and Drew Holiday would just be phenomenal. And pairing that with the playmaking skills of Jokic, I think that, I mean, the Nuggets already are a contender, but there's a lot of doubt with the offseason with some guys potentially leaving. I think having a core of Holiday, Murray, and Jokic would easily, I'd expect, be a top contender in the West.
Yeah, I think that trade really upgrades the Nuggets. I struggle to see if that would actually really happen though. But if Denver could get a guy like Holiday or just another guy that they can maybe insert, they're the wing, whether Jeremy Grant leaves or they try to improve on Gary Harris or trade him away, I think that could really help this team for sure take the next step. I personally just struggle to kind of see them do anything. Uh, like I said, maybe a Millsap sign and trade. I don't really know if I could predict exactly what that would look like, but I think with Porter Jr. coming back, he definitely showed some signs, and maybe now with a year under his belt, kind of the maturing of his game, he could be a very solid starter in this league, I think. And hopefully Denver just has the confidence to play a little consistent. Um, and I think it really hurt them that they got down 3-1 in every playoff series. And just that's a lot of game sevens. That's a lot of games being played, a lot of minutes on your starters, and I think that's just really hard to obviously consistently do. But they definitely have the talent and the ability to be. I mean, they were third, and we're talking about them third in the conference. We're talking about them being better next year. So
Yeah.
but yeah, that's all I have on Denver. We have about 30 seconds left.
Yeah, I don't have anything else to add, really.
All right, I will stop the timer before it goes off then. Do you want to close this out?
Well, with that, thanks for listening to this week, and please rate us 5 stars on your podcast platform. This helps other listeners find our podcast. Next week, we'll be doing our offseason preview for the Southeast Division teams. We'll do the same format with our timers, going over the 5 teams, potential draft picks, signings, and just other offseason moves they can make.
Yes, so we have just 2 more weeks of this format, and then we will move on to something different. But you can find us on social media. We're on Twitter at Miracle Sports NW, and Instagram and Facebook are at Miracle Sports Network. And then we also post every podcast to YouTube every Saturday morning. So just the day after our podcast releases. So if you want to hear us early, please subscribe to and listen to our podcast. But you can also catch us on YouTube, and please subscribe and like our videos there. And then you can check out our website at anchor.fm/thehookshot, where all of our podcasts are also posted on there. So you can check out some of the old ones, as well as get links to various podcasting platforms with the episodes. But we will talk to you next week.